Okay, well, the timer's not up, but I just got rated. First of all, welcome everybody. If there's anything off with my settings, let me know. I haven't streamed in a while. Thank you so much, Tyler, for the raid. Super appreciate. Like, this is my first stream back in I think like almost 6 months, and so for welcoming to have the raid. Welcome, Tyler, and shout out to Tyler. Still finding my bearings. I probably have forgotten how to stream. I should do a shout out. And welcome, Katie. Shout out to Katie. I don't know if I could do a second show. Doesn't look like it. Yes, I have sort of grown somewhat of a beard. Welcome, Katie. Welcome, Bob Marley. Welcome, Hosarus. Anybody that I've forgotten, I apologize. It's a minute since I'm streamed. Still adjusting. Yeah, I know those are the old chat. I'm an old school streamer. I can do the newer one. 1 second. There we go. All right. But yeah, thank you everyone for the warm welcome. And yeah, I was in your stream earlier, Tyler. As always, great content. Like yeah, it's been a long time coming. I returned. Said I would return. And totally, that's how bullying works. If any of my commands work. Okay, that works. So as I mentioned in my Discord, okay, almost 5-6 months ago, that I would be back, taking a break. I just state my word, I am back. I did not disappear completely, as in I stopped streaming on my own channel. I was still going on the occasional panel. I was still on Prime Kai's virtually every week. And it seems like quite a few people have seen me on that Playing with Fire panel, placed a couple of weeks ago. Also, that's thanks to Katie, to Alex. I was pretty much only on there, and overall, that conversation, to say the least. But yeah, a lot has happened, sort of, in the past 5 months. You know, I shared some of the updates. Definitely a roller coaster ride the past 5 or 6 months of getting a job, and then in 5 days, job, being fired from the job, and then applying for other jobs, and then ultimately taking matters, I guess, into my own hands. Where basically since around December or January, I've been doing a lot of tutoring of chemistry, biology, biochemistry, organic chemistry, etc. And so far, let's see, out. And I've gotten so far some pretty good feedback. So I'm going to push that as far as possible. Or, you know, I'm being see how it is. That's essentially what I've been for past 3. And yeah, try to start from the time. But yeah, as I mentioned, the Discord. My last stream, actually, my last stream was on October 1st. Almost exactly. Or like 5 months. And so starting in around October, late October, I applied for a job. I applied for a job at this biotech company. And it was a very long screening process. I might as well just like get right into it. Go use a little bit of the interview process I went. Know how to do. Okay, well, I also have a study up. Okay. So, this is the company that I applied for. And I went through their interview slash screen. It was a very long process, and a process that I had never encountered in speaking with very experienced people in the industry. They had never seen an interview process like this. Maybe that should have been a sign. Who knows? At the end of the day, in retrospect, don't regret any. Ultimately, everything has worked out in the end. I don't really have any real complaints. But definitely at the time that this occurred. So yeah, you know, there were multiple stages. Right? And this was like pretty much part of stage one, and you the corporate cultural fit. You're supposed to read it, go through like their values, typical corporate speak. And you see some of their values here: what ability, collaboration, learning, pretty standard stuff. Okay. But then you're supposed to write a mini essay about it, of like, well, given this information, why do you think you're a good fit for us as fit in culture? Oh, and Bill Synthetic, welcome. Great to see you. Shout out to you. But yeah, I'm filling in about everything. Oh, don't? Okay, well, you're a mod. Supposed to listen. So, yeah, so I was supposed to write a mini essay, pretty much saying why I would fit in, and also shoot 1-minute video. You know, thankfully with my streaming setup, that was a piece of cake. Send it off to them. That was like stage one. And you know, I was pretty happy with my production of my 1-minute video. I pretty much had the same lighting in the background. I don't know for sure, but I think they were, you know, pleasantly surprised with the video that I created. Only 1 minute. And even everything that I said about, you know, my fit company. I think good. But you know, I moved on to the second. Second stage was a technical test. Pretty standard for a lot of startups. Most, generally speaking, most larger company don't do it. Different. But like, yeah, they sent me an actual, basically like a written test. A technical test to, you know, test my knowledge. Have the actual knowledge to do what they're asking me, what the position is. And I even have that on. Yes. My mic is cutting out. Oh, thank you. So thank you very much for letting me know. I might have a filter. Okay. It should hopefully be fixed now. If it's not, let me know, and I'll try to look into it. But yeah, I had a noise gate, and I removed it. So hopefully it's a little bit better now. Okay. And yeah, great to see you. That's pretty true. Always a pleasure. So this was the technical challenge that they sent me. Okay, and this is my writing. These were all my answers. You know, pretty standard questions. So this is a company that they produce lateral flow assays. So what are lateral flow assays? If you've ever done a rapid COVID test, pretty much those are lateral flow assays. Or not pretty much, those are lateral flow assays. And so, you know, they asked me the difference between, you know, pretty standard stuff of competitive versus sandwich lateral flow assays, blah, blah, blah. And then they ask you, you know, to pretty much demonstrate, you know, what some data would look like, with some examples. Okay. And this is what I wrote, and this is pretty much, correct. I didn't really make any mistakes, on the technical test. And then they ask you to design a lateral flow assay, which is what I did here. And you know, again, I have zero experience with this. This was all just going through on my own research and more or less like what I already know about lateral flow assays. And I pretty much, you know, nailed it. There was like one minor mistake, just because, like, yeah, you don't know what you don't know. But pretty much, you know, this is essentially, I would say about 90% correct. At the very least, 80% correct. And then everything else here is also whatever, graphing some stuff, pretty simple. And let's just say they were surprised with my results. Okay. And going through some calculations, pretty standard biochem stuff. This is like, you know, an undergraduate type question. Just calculating concentration. And I even point out, I don't know if this was a trick or not, okay? But, you know, if you're not a biochemist or you're not used to this type of whatever, if you're not in the field, this is all not going to be whatever, not going to make sense to you. But, you know, the question is asking, like, hey, based off of this information, the A280, you know, where I have that little note there, assuming in linear range of spec, assuming the A280, the A280 stands for absorbance at 280. It's like calculate the concentration of your sample. And this is like pretty standard undergraduate biochemistry question. And like, yeah, the value that they give here for the 280, like that's a pretty suspicious value. And I didn't know whether like the tricky things about, at least in my experience with, you know, writing so far, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 of these tests, like some of them, in my opinion, are like poorly designed and poorly worded, or I question even the ability of whoever's designing this test. So it's like, whatever. Oh, looks like we got a bot. They could be real. You're not wrong. They are. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It wouldn't be a welcome back stream if it didn't have a bot showing up. So like, yeah, basically, ultimately, I didn't know if the person writing this question was incompetent, okay, or they're trying to throw me off, because you would not. If you get this value, like, on this instrument, like, something is wrong. Or, like, you're just not doing good science. So that's why I added the note there. I'm like, well, assuming everything's, like, working normally, and, like, this is what you want, like, I'll use this value, but I'm making it known that I know that, like, this does not reflect the real world. And, yeah, whatever. I go through the calculations. Everything is right, etc., etc. And the rest is all basic, more or less like undergrad calculations for sample prep. Nothing super, at least in my opinion, super difficult. Although, you know, I did send, once I was done with it, I sent the test to, you know, some other colleagues that I have. You know, they thought it was challenging. And even some actual industry experts that work in LFA thought it was challenging. Or thought, you know, this was too much to ask for, you know, a job application. But whatever, I appreciate the challenge. And in retrospect, I'm very glad with my performance. And then the rest, again, more calculation stuff. You do have to, this question here definitely required at least some thinking on my part and some problem solving to, like, get to the answer and pretty much make sure I understood what they were asking for. But I did it. I did everything right. Okay. Pretty much, in their own words, like, essentially 100%. There's, like, in their opinion, there's one mistake that I made, but I don't really consider it a mistake. But, you know, I wasn't going to argue with them, because I consider it technically maybe poor wording. Or poor wording of the question. And yeah, the rest is also calculations, somewhat standard stuff. pretty much simulating sort of the type of calculations that you would do in a wet lab environment, okay? Calculating, sample volumes, calculating sample prep, tracking sample volumes, for dilutions, etc., etc. And again, pretty decently standard, at least for my level of experience. Like, once I actually figured out what they were asking for, it was like pretty straightforward. Like, to be honest, like some of this, like, I had to like dig back to like my general chemistry, like 10 years ago practically, because like I don't really do most of these calculations. It's interesting, sort of, at least at this level, how much I rely essentially on intuition of like, yeah, like it's habitual. A lot of these calculations, in my lab experience, my pretty extensive lab experience, like I'm doing these calculations, but I'm sort of like doing them in my head. And like I'm not writing out formulas on paper. A lot of tracking is just like habitual in my head of like, okay, I know what I want, I can calculate it, and a lot of it is just like repetition. But then now that they're asking me of like, okay, now use the formula and go step by step, it's like, oh, okay, I have to remind myself of like what are the actual steps, and instead of relying on my intuition based off of experience, go back to the books. And like even just like the small things of like putting in units. Like when I'm doing my mental calculations in the lab, it's like I'm aware of units and I sort of taken them into account intuitively, just because like it's instinct at this point. But like when I was writing this out, I pretty much had to go out of my way. I'm like, okay, these are the units that I'm using. And it's like, I'm canceling units, etc., etc., which is what you're actually supposed to do by the book. But let's just say if I was actually doing these calculations by the book, like in the lab, it would be a huge time waste. And also, there are a lot of calculators out there that will just, you plug in numbers and it spits out what you want. But yes, this was their technical test. I think they were pretty impressed with my technical test. And like I said, in retrospect, I'm pretty proud of my performance here. Because so this got me to the second stage of the interview process, which is, an actual interview, speaking to people. So the second stage was pretty much an interview with their scientists, if I remember correctly. And well, I mean, they have a website. It's this company. Okay. And since I technically never really signed a true contract, I'm under no NDA. I can say whatever I want. So in the next stage, after that technical test, I submitted it. They were very pleased with it. I was interviewed by their scientists. I was specifically interviewed by this James person here, and this Nelly person there. And spoiler alert, okay? If you read the bios of all three of these scientists here, you might notice that there's a lot of overlap, or a lot of, similarities between the bios. Because all three of these scientists, they come from the same past company. And also, this person, James, is the partner of Jocelyn. James and Jocelyn are partners. And so all three of these came from the same past company that were also developing LFAs. They all relocated to Montreal. And what was relayed to me is, this person got the job with this company, okay? Not business partners, just scientists that worked for a similar company that produced the same type of test. But essentially what happened is, they didn't like that company, or, that company didn't really work out. And so this company, Ellie Health, Ellie, they hired James, or, James applied, they hired him, okay? So no, James and Jocelyn, no, they are a couple. Sorry, I didn't understand your question. Yeah, James and Jocelyn, they are a couple. They are married. They're intimate couples. Yeah, sorry, not business partners. Well, I guess technically they're also business partners, but you know, they're the most intimate of business partners. As in, okay, when I arrived there in late November, like Jocelyn was, you know, whatever, with child or expecting a child, and they were about to go on paternal leave, or not paternal, parental leave. So yeah, but I was interviewed by Nelly and James, pretty much, you know, the scientist interviews. And again, all three of these come from the same company. James has a bachelor's degree. Jocelyn has a bachelor's degree. Nelly, as you read here in her biography, has a master's degree. So whatever, cumulatively, as I sort of, I think, mentioned in the Discord, put together, like, I have more experience than all three of them combined. But whatever. So yes, I was interviewed by James and Nelly. I think, well, in retrospect, okay, since I did end up getting the job technically, I think the interview went well. You know, I shared my experience. I shared what I know. You know, we spent literally like just 1 minute going over my technical test because I pretty much only made one minor mistake. And then from there, what was the next step? There was another step. There was actually two other steps because there was another interview after that. I think the next step was another interview. I'm just trying to think of the order because there was basically a series of other questions, basically more personal questions, kind of like, you know, how would you handle this scenario with like a conflict with your boss? Explain a time where, you know, you set a difficult goal for yourself and how did you achieve that goal? But I think those questions came first, and then I was interviewed by this person, okay, Thomas, and this person, Zoya, and so co-founder, so Marina and Thomas, they're also partners. They're both whatever, intimate partners, and they're both business partners. That's why they are co-founders. Okay, so she's the CEO, he's the chief technical officer. Neither of them have any life science background. Okay, but Thomas has an engineering background, as you can read from his biography. Has a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. So, you know, pretty much whatever, the managers, the head of the companies, pretty much have no strict biotech background. But yes, I was interviewed by Thomas and Zoya, but I think right before that, I had to answer like a series of like whatever 20 questions, pretty much, you know, mostly like a personality profile, I would say. Again, answering questions like, you know, again, how would you handle the difficult situation? You know, goals that you achieved. What are your professional goals for the next 5 years? Blah blah blah, all that stuff. And you know, I spent quite a bit of time answering those questions. Where, you know, each one was like, I would say about half a page of an answer, and I'm not joking. It was like 20 questions. Maybe I have the questions. No, doesn't look like I do. But like, yeah, no joke, it was 20 questions. And there's sort of like 20 mini essay questions. And so yeah, I answered them. I was proud of my answers. Well, at the end of the day, whatever. I was just answering honestly. I wasn't making up stuff. You know, I wasn't trying to come across a certain way. It's just like, whatever. This is what I think. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. And then yeah, so had the interview, and the interview with the scientist, James and Nelly, that was virtual. Okay, so I wasn't there in person, but the interview with Thomas and Zoya, that was That was in person at their office slash lab. Although technically it was in person with Thomas, because Zoya is actually not located, located in another province in Canada. So she was like conference called in. But yeah, I think the in-person or on-site in-person interview went well. Okay, and well, again, in retrospect, I think it did go well because I ended up getting the job. And then after that, I had to send in references, 3 references, not a problem. I had 3 people that were more than happy to recommend me, and 3 people that I'd previously worked with that were, more than happy to recommend me in a both professional and personal capacity. And then after that, then I was briefly interviewed, by the CEO, Marina here. And that was also virtual because they were like away, on a business trip for the company at the time. And so whatever, we just had a fairly quick conference call where like more or less it was like, unless something really went off the rails, it was basically assumed that I had the job, as in like, unless my references didn't check out, like my references had bad things to say, or for whatever reason, Marina like hated me over the conference call, I was basically being prepared to get the job, which I did end up getting. Didn't last very long, but I did get the job. And I ended up starting on a Monday. So they sent me a schedule, an onboarding schedule, which I believe I have that. Yeah. This is it. But, spoiler alert, no surprise, they didn't stick to the schedule. They very much not stick to the schedule, which I didn't really expect them to stick to the schedule anyways. But I do always find it funny when companies behave in this manner. Like, oh yeah, we're super structured, but then we'll go off the rails. So I started on a Monday. That's pretty much my starting date. Okay, and the days are, pretty much, in a nutshell, the first 2 days, okay, the Monday and Tuesday, I was basically just like shadowing, okay, of like, people presenting stuff to me, taking basically, some mental notes and writing some things down, how the company overall works, the structure, corporate vision, etc., etc. As you can see, okay, as the breakdown for the day, like, I'm not really doing anything other than like listening. That was the Monday. And then the Tuesday, pretty much the same thing, where instead of like, shadowing and getting information about, the corporation or the company and like how they work and their vision, Tuesday is pretty much shadowing the scientists. So you can see that, who I'm like shadowing or dealing with, you can see that it's the scientists. And I am mostly dealing, pretty much 90% of my shadowing of the scientists is with James and Jocelyn. And maybe throughout the entire 5 days that I was there, I maybe spent like, an hour or 2 with Nelly. And again, all 3 of them are pretty much like come from the same company. They've all been pretty much former friends / colleagues. And so yeah, so Tuesday, as you can see, the entire day, even though again they didn't stick to this schedule, but the entire day is basically getting information and shadowing what they do in the lab, etc., etc. The ins and outs of lateral flow assay production. And then Wednesday, okay, is pretty much when I actually start doing things, as in like I start getting my hands dirty in the lab, as in like, I'm producing stuff. And so you can see the Wednesday, that's, again, they don't stick to this schedule. Definitely did not stick to this schedule. In the morning, we're supposed to discuss experiment design, etc., etc. And then the rest of the day is basically experiment execution with the other scientists as support. And, you know, I would say the day technically ends at around, I would say, not 5 p.m., but probably closer to like 7, 8 p.m., maybe 9. Which, you know, again, I more or less like expected. You know, there's at some level, you can call me naive, but I was aware that they were not going to stick to the schedule, which didn't surprise me. But yes, the experiment that I ended up running was over the course of basically 2 days. And so basically, you know, I run, oh, Doffy, welcome. Good to see you. Yeah, I am back. I'm giving sort of an update on, you know, a little bit of what I've been up to in the past 5-6 months. And I'm going through my very brief experience with the job that I got back in November, where right now I'm in the middle of pretty much going through the 5 days that I was there. Pretty much the 5 days is represented here, the Monday to Friday. And so yeah, Wednesday and Thursday is all experiment execution, as in doing the experiment, etc., etc., with the support, okay, I would say support of their scientists. And so yeah, pretty much Wednesday, a full day from like 9 a.m. to like 7, 8 p.m. And pretty much roughly the same thing on Thursday, or actually more closer to like 10 a.m. to like, you know, 6, 7 p.m. It took, that's a good question. I would say I can even sort of trace it back. When did I? Do 1 moment. Okay, yeah, I started this pretty much in like the first week of November. Yeah, so like I got the job at the end of November. Okay, and like yeah, I started it pretty much in the first week of November, because I checked, I gave an update in the Discord, and I updated the Discord at pretty much in the beginning of November, saying, hey, I'm going through this interview process, and then like yeah, that was my official start date. And like they wanted me to start like really quickly. And like I was even going through like their accelerated application process. Like it was even to the point of like you know, I got the word that I got the job on like a Wednesday, and they wanted me to start like on the fall, like literally like 24 hours later on like the Thursday. And I'm like, I'd rather like push it to Monday if we can. And that's why I started, thankfully, on a Monday. But yeah, it was at least 3 weeks, if not 4 weeks. So yeah, pretty much around a month. And then, so yeah, Wednesday and Thursday, me running an experiment. I actually still have more or less the protocol of the experiment that they asked me to run. And then Friday, okay, my last technically sort of official day of like working there, that's pretty much their meeting day. They're pretty much company meeting day. They're like, hey, all of the stuff that you've done Monday to Thursday, you know, we meet about it, and whatever, we discuss it, etc., etc. As you can see, it's basically as the breakdown is, and again, they didn't stick to the schedule. But like, yeah, it's pretty much all miscellaneous stuff. Meetings, inventory, lab cleanup, etc., etc. And we had, okay, in the morning, most importantly, we had this assay meeting. This assay meeting is where, you know, that's where the scientists are supposed to pretty much, you know, meet and go over the data that they've collected throughout the week, and, you know, discuss any issues, and, you know, hopefully discuss successes. But generally speaking, in science, you're discussing, you know, issues, problems, failures. And so, yeah, each scientist pretty much presents their data. I presented my data. I technically still have it. And you know, my experiment worked out. I have it. I have it on the audio recording that my experiment was a success, which I was proud of, because I'm not gonna lie. And I also have that on the audio recording. I explicitly say, like, I had zero expectation that my experiment was going to work at all, because like virtually no experiment like works the first time, especially if this is a brand new technique. Not brand new technique, but rather like, well, some of it is brand new. The actual assembly of a lateral flow assay, I have zero experience with, like, you know, assembling and making a lateral flow assay. But a bunch of the other techniques that they happen to use in that process, like, I totally have experience with. But at the end of the day, what they're doing is not overly complicated, or at least fundamentally not overly complicated. But like, yeah, my experiment was a success. And if anything, you know, the CEO was, I think, not the CEO, the co-founder, Thomas, I think, was quite impressed with my results, because I don't think they were necessarily expecting that. And then there was this instance, okay, and just maybe as a sign of maybe something that I should have clued into, but I more or less, like, you know, just as for sure in retrospect, they were judging me throughout this process, especially I would say the scientists, James, Nellie, and Jocelyn, I think were clearly judging me throughout this process, even though, again, I spent like virtually no time with Nellie. But yeah, I was also not judging them, but, you know, trying to assess the situation of, like, you know, what type of environment did I walk into. And this assay meeting was like very interesting, to say the least. There was one particular instance that, you know, in a future meeting that I got an audio recording, you know, basically one of the scientists had an issue with their experiment. Okay, and we're all there together, the scientists, when this other scientist, oh, Cernu, welcome, great to see you. Yes, overall things are going well, but, you know, I'm going over a little bit of, like, you know, the lowlights in the past 6 months, but in the end, everything has, like, worked out, and, you know, I'm pretty satisfied with where I'm at, and yeah, I pretty much have, looking back, you know, I'm confident that everything worked out the way it should have, for the better. So yeah, this one scientist, they had an issue with their experiment. Okay, basically the experiment did not go according to plan. And so in typical scientist fashion, you know, we try to think of, like, well, what went wrong? Typical troubleshooting. And, you know, a standard go-to is, like, you know, contamination. Your samples were contaminated by whatever. Obviously, it's more complicated than that. You know, typically we try to say the source of contamination, or, like, come up with a list of, like, okay, not only is it possible that contamination happened, but what is... Oh, Chase Sadie, thank you so much for the follow. Much appreciated. Happy to have you here. I'm a biochemist. I cover science and news, although technically, I would say I'm not going over what I typically go over in my streams. But I am going over, you know, my brief experience with a biotech company. This company here. So yes, this scientist brought up this issue of contamination. And so we tried to narrow it down of, like, well, what could be contaminating your samples? And again, this is all for the purposes of, like, down the road, a consumer product. We're developing tests, and we want tests for people to buy as a consumer product, as essentially an approved medical device. So, you know, there's a certain level of quality that needs to be upheld if you actually want to gain approval as a medical device for a consumer product. So in this conversation of contamination, yes, essentially, yes, exactly. It is this company here, this Ellie Health company, for the non-hormonal, non-invasive form of contraception. And so I'm going over my brief experience, my roughly 5 days, technically 7 days. So yeah, once this issue of contamination was brought up and we tried to think of sources, well, one of the proposed sources of contamination is like, hey, maybe the materials that we're using during sample handling, which is totally does happen, like the materials we're using is somehow leaching into the samples, sort of like, how people now know, so to speak, of like, your plastic water bottles. Like when your plastic water bottle is sitting in the sun, like there's stuff leaching into your water that you're then consuming. The same thing can happen in a research setting of like, we're using plastic tubes, etc., etc. And so it can totally happen of like a source of contamination is like stuff from the plastic you're using is leaching into your samples. Obviously, we don't use the same plastic as plastic bottles. We tend to use much more stable and inert plastic. And this is like the thing that was identified or flagged. But like, yeah, when we were having this conversation about like the materials that we're using to prepare samples, the question came up of like pretty much, pipette tips. And pipette tips are like pretty much like the workhorse of any like biochemistry or biology lab. These are the things that we use to handle small quantities of liquids. And like, so when the question was brought up, like, oh, maybe our pipette tips are contaminating our samples somehow, the question was posed by someone else of like, well, what are our pipette tips made of? And I thought someone would speak up, because like it's kind of a pretty basic question. I think I highlighted this in the Discord, where pretty much like 99% or like your standard pipette tips that you'd find in a research lab, they are made of polypropylene. Like unless you somehow go out of your way to like buy some sort of specialty tips, virtually every tip in existence will be made of polypropylene. But like, I paused, I thought someone else would speak up, and then once I realized no one else is speaking up, I spoke up and I said, well, I'm pretty sure that they're polypropylene. I'm not 100% sure, even though in the time, like I was like 99.999% sure, but I didn't try not to work in absolutes, but I said, yeah, I'm reasonably sure that they're polypropylene. And I was pretty surprised that nobody else said anything or had that information offhand. And that might have been sort of like the first clue, or that should maybe clued in like what was to unfold after that. Well, like, yeah, the meeting concluded, and we had the Friday forum. Their Friday forum is pretty much the entire company, meets in person and virtually, where, we have people at the office, and then we have people, in other provinces in Canada, and they conference in. I would say this is pretty typical in most startups and probably other, medium-sized companies. I was just like, yeah, pretty much the entire company gathers, and we go through our week, wins and losses, etc., etc. And yeah, Clear Blue already exists, and I'm very curious to see how this company pans out. At the end of the day, I never wish, generally speaking, failure on any person or company. If they succeed, all the more power to them. I'm a little bit skeptical on their chances of success, and I think there's already signs of their success not really panning out. But yeah, so we have this Friday forum, okay, and yeah, it ends pretty much, thankfully, on time. And I leave the office at around 5:30, 6 p.m. And then I go to the gym. And I actually go to the gym where in my naivete, I got a second gym membership that was close to this place of work. Since again, in retrospect, in my naivete, I didn't think there was any chance that I would not be sticking around for at least a few months. It was not on my radar that I would only be there for 5 days. And so during the first week, the Monday or Tuesday, there happened to be a gym nearby this place of work, and I got a membership to that gym. It's literally pretty much like connected to the same building. So yeah, at 5:30, I leave the office, and I go to the gym, and I'm working out, for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then at around 7:30 p.m. I get a notification on my phone. 7:30. I get a notification on my phone that I received an email, and that email, okay, was from this person, their chief of staff, and the email said, "Hey, can we set up a meeting for tomorrow sometime?" And I, even though it was a little bit suspicious for a meeting on a Saturday, but I tried not to think much of it, because at the end of the day, I don't really know how this company fully works since I've only been there at that point for 5 days. But like, yeah, it sort of a little bit, a slight, yellow alert went off in my brain. Like, meeting on a Saturday? Okay, sure, whatever. Had the meeting, so Saturday afternoon rolls around. I think it's scheduled at 3 p.m. Have the meeting, okay, with Zoya. It's a virtual call because, again, she's not in the same province as me. She's on the West Coast. And she informs me that, like, yeah, I'm basically, not basically, I am being fired. And, that was totally a shock to me, for a number of reasons. One, because, like, leaving the meeting that I just had, more or less, or the other day, my experiment was a success, and I have that on audio recording. And I was pretty satisfied with my performance. And also, it's like, at the end of the day, as you can see here from this schedule, I only did like literally 2 days of actual work on my part. Monday was basically listening and shadowing. Tuesday, listening and shadowing. Wednesday and Thursday are the only times that I actually did something, produced something on my own. And so I was also shocked of like, well, what, did something catastrophically happen in, those 48 hours? Even though the feedback that I get is like positive, or again, the experiment that I ran was a success. So yeah, during that call on Saturday, when Zoya was sharing the information that I'm being fired, I, even though I was definitely shocked, I was still pretty much, pretty calm and collected and trying to process in real time. And so I inquired as to like, well, is there a particular reason for it? Did I do something? Or it's like, basically, what are the reasons that I'm being fired, and being fired after 5 days? And what she said, and this is the Saturday afternoon meeting, okay? And she's basically the messenger, as in like, again, all of pretty much the vast majority of my dealings have been with James and Nellie. So it's basically based on, not James and Nellie, James and Jocelyn, sorry, the husband and wife team. So basically it's through, I'm being assessed and judged by pretty much all the interactions that I had with James and Jocelyn, because 90% of my time there was spent, either speaking and interacting with James and Jocelyn or shadowing them. And so Zoya, okay, as the messenger says, well, it seems like you're not meshing with the team. The team feels like you're passive aggressive, or the team feels like they have a hard time reading you. Basically something to do with my attitude is what I'll boil down to. Which, that was also a shock to me, because at the end of the day, anything's possible. But I had never received that type of feedback in my life, like before, of being passive aggressive, or like, anything really, whatever, wrong with my demeanor. But, my response was, well, if that's their interpretation of my behavior, like, that's totally valid. But like, it definitely wasn't my intention to come across as passive aggressive. And also, at the very least, like, I would have at least appreciated, the opportunity to like receive the feedback and like make some sort of correction. or basically asking for some sort of like second chance. Of like, I don't know how you can like on the spot like judge someone so harshly and so quickly. And I also said that like I also would have appreciated that you actually like basically have the guts to say this to my face, where not through like the messenger. And Zoya actually seemed, to her credit, okay, I don't really have any issues. I pretty much have essentially positive things to say about Zoya. But yeah, to her credit, she seemed to be pretty receptive to what I was saying, where I think I was actually kind of convincing her of like, yeah, why are we coming to this snap judgment and getting rid of this person so quickly? And I think even Zoya herself was a little bit suspicious of the claim of me being labeled as passive aggressive. Because again, you know, she was more or less with me throughout the interview process, and she was there virtually during one of the in-person interviews, and you know, I think she would have probably picked up on some sort of like passive aggressiveness. But like, if anything, I think she was pretty positive towards me and pretty much like trying to advocate for me. You know, I think I made a positive impression on Zoya, and so I think she was receptive to me saying like, hey, I think I deserve a second chance, or at least, you know, give me the feedback to my face. Basically, don't be a coward and like label me as passive aggressive, or like, you know, take issues in my demeanor and like not say it to my face. So that was the Saturday. And so since Zoya was receptive to what I was saying during that call with her on Saturday, she said she's going to go back to the team. She said she's going to go back and see if there's any chance that, you know, I can get a second chance. And to her credit, you know, she got back to me pretty quick. I think it was within like, you know, I think like 8 hours or so, or like 16 hours. But basically, yeah. Had the meeting ended Saturday afternoon, and I think by like Sunday morning, like I had my answer. My answer was, okay, Zoe emailed me saying, well, pretty much the decision is final, okay? We're firing you, but, you know, if you want feedback, okay, we will give you feedback. And she offered to have a meeting, an in-person meeting, with these scientists, okay, Jocelyn, Nelly, and James, to get that feedback. Like, you know, again, the message that I've got so far on Saturday is like something's off with my attitude, my demeanor. You know, I'm passive aggressive, I'm hard to read. You know, they're not sure if like I'm assimilating the information. So, you know, definitely it's a pretty low point for me. You know, I was a little bit stressed. But, you know, Monday, so the meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. Zoya gave the option of like, well, we can have a virtual meeting pretty much all together, or we can have an in-person meeting. And I'm like, no, we're having an in-person meeting. Like, say it to my face. So she scheduled the meeting for Monday morning. So, you know, I had my 5 days there. Monday to Friday. Saturday, I basically got the word that I was being fired. And Monday morning is when that in-person meeting to receive my feedback of like, hey, this is everything. These are all the reasons that we're firing you. Or, you know, to get more information about my attitude and demeanor. So Monday morning rolls around. I believe the meeting was scheduled for exactly Monday morning at 9:30 a.m. I showed up on time. No surprise. Nobody else. So the meeting in total was 6 people. Okay, it was me. It was Thomas in person. Zoya, conference called in. James, in person, but they were like half an hour late. Nelly, not in person, even though they could have been in person. You know, coincidentally, they chose to stay virtual and have the virtual meeting. Same thing with Jocelyn. Opted not to come into the office that day. I know it was only James, okay, even though, again, they're husband and wife. James made it in person, but was like half an hour, 45 minutes late. And so, you know, that was pretty much like my crucifixion, so to speak. Where this is me getting the feedback of like, I pretty much was calling them out, saying, hey, if you have issues with me, say it to my face. If you have issues with my demeanor and my attitude, like, let's see if you can say it to my face. And, you know, no surprise. In retrospect, no surprise, nothing about my attitude was brought up at all, like, whatsoever. It was the most nitpicky, like, of processes of, like, any sort of mistake that they can, like, extract, like, that's going to be used as their justification for getting rid of me. But it's pretty weird to be overqualified, doing good work, and being fired for personality issues after just 1 week. Yeah, I agree with you. And that's why, you know, at the end of the day, I am speculating. Ultimately, I will never know their true reasons for firing me. Okay? So take that, definitely take that into account. Even though I have the audio recording of that meeting that was like half an hour. And, you know, like I said, I have James saying that my experiment was a success. So it's like, you know, what more do you want? And so, yeah, but this is my speculation, and I'm pretty confident, as in, like, if I'm a betting person, would I bet all my money and belongings that this is the reason? No, but I would bet probably, like, you know, 50 to 60%, maybe 70% of my assets of, like, this is the true reason as to why they're getting rid of me. Because, again, during the actual, you know, face-to-face meeting, nothing about my demeanor or personality was brought up, like, at all. It was all like, oh, Corey didn't take notes, okay? And, like, yeah, I didn't take notes. And even Nelly herself, like I said, she was giving her feedback, okay? And like I said, I didn't really spend much time with Nelly in terms of, like, interacting or shadowing. Not that, like, I went out of my way not to deal with her, but, like, just based off of, like, the schedule and the tasks that were delegated to me. Like, pretty much, I was just by default, like, interacting with James and Jocelyn. So it's like, it's not like I was avoiding Nelly. It's just, like, baked into the schedule. I wasn't really interacting. I wasn't scheduled really to interact with Nelly. Again, I may be at most, like, over the course of the 5 days that I was there, like, maybe spent like 2 hours with her and maybe exchanged a few words with her. But even then, she was giving, like, her own feedback, and she only really had, like, one thing to say, which was just, like, an observation. Like, this really, she, from her perspective, she observed some sort of, like, mistake, or she observed that, like, I wasn't taking notes, and that, like, whatever sent up a flag in her mind. I remember researching this company after this happened. They seem much more like a small tech. Yeah, they're definitely, so they are small. So pretty much, this is their website. And so you can see the entirety, pretty much. Oh yeah, and also, I was hired alongside this person. Okay, so it wasn't just me they hired. They hired me in addition to her. And this person, as highlighted in their little mini bio there, they literally had just recently graduated from university. They had just received their bachelor's degree, and not in biology, not in biochemistry, not to, like, bash the program or anything, or bash their academic background, but basically just to highlight that, you know, they graduated in a field that is, you know, adjacent or not directly related to, like, what they're doing here. They graduated in neuroscience, which, like, again, there's nothing wrong with that, but let's just say it's not directly related in terms of the type of work that they're doing here in terms of developing testing for, let's say, contraception or for, for a medical device. And Louis 13, welcome. Good to see you. Yeah, it's been a minute, and so I'm not gonna lie. In the week following, so like the week after this, it was a pretty dark time for me, pretty sad time. Not gonna lie. Definitely my confidence was shaken. Okay, and I was definitely questioning my abilities and my competence. But thankfully, okay, it takes quite a bit more to truly shake my confidence and to truly question my competence. And also, thankfully, I had a really good support network behind me, a support network of very highly qualified and knowledgeable individuals to I'm good at reassuring myself, but also to add on to that of reassuring me of almost certainly this is nothing to do with you. This is more a sign of the company. Did they seem like nice people? Ultimately, when I was leaving, when I left on the Friday, okay, after this Friday forum, left at around 5:30, 6 o'clock, I was feeling good. I'm they seem like nice people. They seem pretty welcoming. And, I feel like, I can get along with them and maybe develop, friendships with some or all of them. Obviously, in retrospect, I was wrong about that. And maybe that's a reflection of, my poor judge of character. Although at the end of the day, I wasn't really making any judgments, as in everything was still an open question to me of I wasn't as quick to judge them as they were quick to judge me, as in they totally seemed friendly. They totally seemed like I could get along with them. Obviously, in retrospect, I was wrong about that. And like I said, I know that everything has worked out for the better. And moving forward, let's just say, if the company contacted me, asking me for whatever reason, hey, we want you to come back, I'll be I'm almost, unless you're gonna throw a big pile of money at me, even then, just on principle alone, unless these individuals are no longer working there, I would not choose to work there. But when I left on the Friday, again, I was feeling good. And in fact, this is a reflection of how good I was feeling of during this Friday forum, okay, I was recently hired, okay, obviously, as I'm just went through. And so during this Friday forum, they also mentioned that they're interviewing other candidates for other positions, specifically a lab coordinator position, pretty much someone to manage the lab, because basically, as it stands now or at the time, okay, when it comes to managing the lab, and when we say manage the lab, what we're referring to is ordering supplies, keeping track of inventory, making sure the instruments are running properly, they're calibrated, samples are being tracked, etc., etc. Important tasks when it comes to running a lab. Those tasks were essentially being done by, pretty much spread out or delegated to the scientists. And so they were looking to hire a lab manager, as in the R&D scientist. They're focused on research and development, and they're not, wasting time, so to speak, with, lab coordinator or lab manager responsibilities, keeping track of inventory, and, keeping track of samples, calibrating the instruments, etc., etc. So during that Friday forum, when they mentioned that they're screening candidates for that position, okay, Since, I was feeling good about my experience so far, I actually recommended someone. I referred someone to them. I also knew someone else that was searching for a job, and so I knew they are technically a former student of mine. Okay, I taught them, I think both Biochemistry 2 and Biochemistry 3. And I think maybe one other course. But either way, former student of mine. And so I knew that they were looking for a job, and so yeah, I referred them to them. That's let's say a sign of how I was feeling at around 5:30, 6 o'clock. Okay, obviously things changed less than 24 hours later, but the person that I referred to them, okay, they themselves, they also went through, they got pretty deep into the interview process. They didn't end up getting the job, but I don't think it has to do with them not being qualified for the job. I don't know for sure, but I suspect that they're no longer hiring a lab coordinator or a lab manager. As in, like, I think they were screening the person I referred to them in the hopes that they would hire someone for the position. But I suspect, I don't know for sure, this is pure speculation, but I suspect that they're not in a position to hire a lab manager or a lab coordinator. I don't know for sure. What I do know, okay, is during my time there, okay, like I said, Monday and Tuesday is pretty much me getting a lay of the land, getting a presentation about the company, how the company works, what their vision is, what their timeline is. And according to their timeline, okay, one of the reasons why they were looking to hire more scientists is because they were looking to scale up, okay? As in, currently, okay, if you go on their website, this is their website, they're looking to develop a product. They're looking to develop a consumer product in the form of a medical device, okay? And so and you can see the pop-up to join their wait list, okay? So they have no source of revenue. They have no money coming in, okay? They are, as of right now, they are running on pretty much, money that they fundraised or, venture capital, blah, blah, blah. And so they were hiring scientists like myself in the hopes that, like, they get approval, they get FDA approval, okay, for their medical device. Mooncake, welcome. Great to see you. Shout out to you. Hope you're doing well. Definitely check out Mooncake. Not only do they go on panels, I know them from Prime panels, but I also know that they play League of Legends. I don't play League of Legends, and I know there's a certain stigma about League of Legends players. But if you're interested in chill streams and Prime panels, and yes, they are also Canadian, but I believe they're a West Coast Canadian. They're not a true Canadian like me, a Quebecer.
Show me the money.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's super generous for the sub. Obviously, I'm joking. You're a true Canadian. But as a Quebecer, I'm obliged to say that we're the only real true Canadians. But yeah, I'm just going through my brief experience with a company that I was briefly hired and then quickly fired from. So yeah, their timeline, and yeah, thank you so much for the sub. That's super generous. And yeah, despite me even insulting you as a Quebecer, your generosity shines through. So I don't take that for granted. So yeah, their timeline is they were hiring scientists because they were looking to scale up, and their hopes was that they get FDA approval in like December or like early 2024. Okay, and they were looking to scale up, of like they have their consumer product ready to sell. Okay, as in money coming in. Their timeline was the first quarter of 2024. And, if you look at the dates, okay, if you look at their website, as you just saw, it's still a wait list. As far as I can tell, this is pure speculation, but it does not seem like they've hit their milestone of like having a consumer product, an approved medical device as a consumer product in the first quarter of 2024. And that's why I don't think they're in the position to scale up. Of like they were hoping to hire a lab manager so that all of their R&D scientists, okay, like potentially myself at the time, would be devoted to like not only research and development but like making the lateral flow assays. But I don't think that has panned out. But that is pure speculation on my part. But to sort of wrap up, I don't want to, even though I've spent, I guess, maybe a little over an hour now on the topic, but not to like belabor the point. But like, yeah, I had the meeting on the Monday morning. Like I said, virtually everyone was late for the meeting. Nothing about my personality or demeanor was brought up. It was basically just like nitpicking mistakes to sort of justify getting rid of me. And I brought up the fact, okay, I have the audio recordings. I brought up the fact of like me knowing that I was the only one that knew that their pipette tips were made of polypropylene. I brought up the fact, okay, that all three of them here, okay, all of the research scientists there, they have no teaching experience whatsoever. Not only teaching like whatever in a classroom, but like, teaching lab-based skills, okay? No, so it's a good question, Louis. Thankfully, okay, in my area, we are a one-party consent for audio recordings. As in, I can record them without them knowing. And I'm contemplating maybe I believe I posted some of the audio recordings, at least one in the Discord. But like, yeah, contained in the audio recordings, I have the clip of like, I straight up asked the question, like, does anybody here have teaching experience at all whatsoever? And it's just like dead silence. And then after like the dead silence for a couple of seconds, James, I believe, says, well, I like teaching, or of the three of us, I like teaching. But yeah, at the end of the day, no teaching experience. Yeah, like I said, all three of them combined, I have, more experience than all three of them put together. But, that's it. That's basically the end. Maybe I'll revisit this. Maybe I'll play some of the audio recordings next time. But, I don't want to waste too much time on it. But pretty much, that was my experience back in late November into December. Okay? And so, like I said, pretty much the week after that, I'm not gonna lie, like I said, not the most pleasant week. I was pretty down, but I was able to pick myself, back up, and like I said, I was questioning my abilities and my competence a little bit, but thankfully it takes more than that for me to lose faith in myself, and also not just me alone. I totally had a great support system of friends, colleagues, former colleagues, family, of course. Super important. And so it wasn't only myself that was able to sort of, pull me out of that, little hole that I went down. But yeah, once that week passed, obviously I had to reevaluate some things. and do a little bit of soul searching, and maybe trying to figure out, where do I go from here. And if you look at the timeline, so like my last day was on the Monday, so Friday, December 2nd, so 3rd, 4th, so December 5th, the Monday, that's when I had my crucifixion. That was my last day at the office, handed in my key, and everything else. And so, back on the job search, but like this is early December, and no surprise, December, going into the holidays, as far as I know, and in my limited experience, that there's not a real rush to hire leading up to the holidays. Okay, but regardless, I still went on the search. And I think, as I mentioned in the Discord, I came across a company that, like, based off of the posting, okay, it's almost like the posting was like too good to be true. Almost like the posting should have said just like looking for Corey, where they were looking for someone who's a specialist in SPR, surface plasmon resonance. Okay, and I've mentioned that before, and if I'm an expert in anything, I wouldn't say I'm a true expert, but I'm the closest to being an expert in that, if anything at all. Where the company that laid me off almost a year ago now, like that was a company that I worked for about 2.5 years, or a little over 2 years. That was a strict SPR company. I was doing surface plasmon resonance pretty much day in and day out for about 2 years. And so when I came across this posting from this company of like, hey, looking for someone that has extensive experience in SPR, I'm like, oh, I'm going to apply to that. And I applied pretty assertively, or if not aggressively, because I sent in my application, and I also I tracked down the recruiter, and I sent a personalized email to the recruiter. I tracked them down through LinkedIn, and I said hey, listen, based off the job description, this seems like a really good opportunity. I'd be more than happy to discuss it. I wasn't asking for the job. I was pretty much asking for a conversation. And I had that conversation. Pretty much it was around mid-December, December, I don't know, 15th or something, where that company that was looking for an SPR specialist, the recruiter contacted me saying, hey, seems like you might be a good fit. Let's have, that initial screening call, standard for any company. You never know. You always have to try to get past the gatekeeper, the HR recruiter. So I had the screening call with the HR recruiter. This was basically, again, mid-December, so pretty much right before the holidays. And it was virtual, since I think, as I mentioned in the Discord, that company was located out west, specifically in Vancouver. And so if, in fact, I got it, I would have to relocate to Vancouver. But, I potentially have no problem with that. And, again, based off of the opportunity, it would be a really great opportunity. And based off of the salary that they were posting, which, to their credit, they posted the salary, since that seems to be pretty rare, that also seemed like a really great opportunity. So I had the initial screening call with the HR recruiter with that company that was looking for an SPR specialist, and it was a virtual call. I thought it went well. The call lasted, I think, 45 minutes to an hour, which I think is, let's say, longer than your standard, HR recruiting screening call. But again, maybe I'm just not good at reading situations. But it seemed like it was going well. It seemed like they were receptive to what I was saying. It seems like even they were enjoying the conversation and, the feedback and sharing my experience. That's why it lasted, 45 minutes to an hour. But had the call, and towards the end of the call, they said, well, the holidays are coming up, but, you should hear back in the next couple of weeks, either right before the holidays or the first week of January, because, understandably, they're going on holidays like virtually everyone else is, in, North America and whatever, the Western world, so to speak. But whatever, never, I was basically ghosted. Never heard anything whatsoever. And I even reached back out. I followed up. I sent a polite email saying, hey, is there any update at all on, the process? Even though, like, I was more or less, I'm okay with, like, not getting a job or, like, being rejected. I'm not okay, or let's say, I take issue with, like, someone outright lying to your face, or, like, it's super interesting to me psychologically, of how many people are almost like going out of their way to lie, or even like, they're basically putting themselves in a position to lie when they don't even have to. It's almost like they want to lie and lie to your face. Because when I had that call with the HR recruiter, with the screening call, like, I didn't ask the question of like, when will I hear back, or like, what's the next step. I pretty much, like, they offered that information. They pretty much said, like, you'll hear back from us in the next couple of weeks, or like the first week of January. I didn't ask for that information. So I don't know why you would like say that and then, not live up to that. Where it's like, again, you're almost like going out of your way to make yourself out as a liar. But whatever, no surprise. Pretty standard. I was ghosted. Never heard anything from them. And so I applied to a couple other companies, and this is another reason why, I took matters into my own hands, and essentially just another example of like dishonesty. Of like, I have a friend / colleague. They are working for a large multinational biotech company. And they've been there for years, like 2 or 3 years, if not maybe even going on 4 years. And so I reached out to them saying, hey, is your company hiring? And, to my surprise, they were hiring. And it seemed like they were hiring for, something that I would be well qualified for. Not that I have specific experience with, what they were asking for, or not, I would say rather not that I have extensive experience of what they were asking for. We're going to get into some science and research in a bit, when I talk about experience. We're trying to apply a scientific process to like searching for a job, or like, how unscientific searching for a job is, or how companies search for employees, how unscientific and, let's say, miscalibrated that is when I talk about experience, where, it begs the question, is experience, a good metric to judge employee performance, or to screen for when it comes to prospective employees? That's a scientific question. And, I dug into the literature to try to answer that question. Spoiler alert, doesn't appear to be a strong correlation between, experience and whether it predicts the performance of an employee. And if anything, there's essentially no correlation. But that's how the job market works. So like, we're looking, you need to have this experience and whatever, 10 years of experience with like only this. But whatever. For this other company that my friend / colleague worked for, that they've been working for a few years, they had an opening for a position that, like, I had some experience with what they wanted, but not a lot of experience. But what they wanted was like not super complex. They were essentially looking for someone that has experience with flow cytometry. And that's not really an overly complicated. It's basically, it's a bunch of tubes and fluids, or rather running samples through tubes, okay, liquid samples through tubes, and you know, a bunch of detectors, or rather shining light through samples and detectors. Flow cytometry, pretty much to sort cells. You know, if I have extensive experience with SPR is a flow-based. It's pretty much ultimately, at its core, pretty much the same setup. You're flowing a bunch of liquid. You're flowing a bunch of liquid samples. You know, and there's detector stuff happening. Same thing with flow cytometry, but it's just like, yeah, you're flowing samples containing cells, and you are literally pretty much like you're cell counting or you're cell sorting. And I totally have experience with it, but like, yeah, I don't have years of experience, but I'm very confident that, you know, I can get up to speed like really quickly and, you know, master the technique really quickly. But, you know, who knows? Technically, you know, it's possible that for whatever reason, I'd just be absolutely terrible at flow cytometry. So, yeah, but for that position, that is what they were largely looking for. Someone with experience in flow cytometry. And, you know, they asked me questions about it. Okay, at least so that company was looking for someone to fill that position. And so, thankfully, okay, my friend, I gave my CV to my friend/colleague, and they handed it to their supervisor, and they gave their recommendation, which I'm super grateful for, where I have no doubt that my friend advocated for me to at least, you know, get my foot in the door. Whether I get the job, that's, you know, up to me, so to speak. But yeah, they pretty much got me that my foot in the door, and they got me pretty much that first initial screening call with the HR recruiter. So I had a phone interview with the HR recruiter, sharing my experience, and, you know, they were asking me questions, you know, basic fundamental questions about flow cytometry, because I was speaking with an HR recruiter, not a scientist. So, you know, they're not gonna be asking me super advanced questions, because they're not really qualified to A, ask those questions, and B, even really sort of like understand the answers. But they were essentially just determining if, you know, I understood the fundamentals for flow cytometry, which I'm like 99.999% sure that I was answering their questions like very correctly, and, you know, exactly what they were looking for. But yeah, I had that call, lasted for about 30-45 minutes, and, you know, I was feeling pretty good, you know, but despite my past experiences, still feeling pretty good, which, you know, whether that says something about me being naive or me being too optimistic, I don't know, or maybe even too dumb. I've seen studies that suggest things like CVs are poor predictor. Yeah, absolutely. And we're gonna, you know, like I said, we are going to get into some science to, you know, start my comeback in covering science and research. But to sort of, yeah, wrap up sort of the update to my life, where it's like, yeah, in January, February, I had it was January. I had that initial call with that HR recruiter. And then they said, oh, well, you'll hear back from us in 1 or 2 weeks. Okay. And more specifically, you'll hear back from us about the next step. Because, you know, if I go through the interview process, it is a multi-step process. But, well, to their credit, I did hear back from, yes. I will also shout you out again. So shout out Katie. We are having a panel, I believe, well, tentatively, I think it's going to be scheduled on Wednesday or Thursday. What was it mentioned? But like, yes, so Katie's going to be having a discussion panel, I guess, / debate panel on whether parenting is authoritarian. So if you want to check that out, follow Katie's channel. I probably won't be streaming it on my end, Maybe I will. I don't know. But if you for sure want to check it out, okay, check it out on Katie's channel. But like, yeah, me, yeah, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll put an update in the Discord. So yeah, to the credit of this company, I did hear back. I got an email after that initial call, that initial HR, recruiter call. But the email said, we're not going to continue with your application because we're going with a more qualified candidate, which, that's fine. Even though, whatever, not to be arrogant, but like, I think that's pretty sus. But, it's possible. They may have found someone with, years and years of flow cytometry experience. Totally in the realm of possibility that they found someone more qualified. But I would say it's a little bit suspicious that just after one HR recruiter call, that they can make the assessment, oh, not qualified enough, or totally this is like the way more qualified person. But whatever, I'm not going to put much thought into these things. But here's the kicker, where, like I said, this company, I have a friend that works at this company. They're the ones that referred me, okay? As in, like, I sent my CV to them, they printed it out, okay? Where, probably, again, to my friend's credit, lots of things are done in an automated fashion these days, or is like, even done by AI. So, if I applied through, let's say, their website, or, through LinkedIn, there's a pretty decent chance that it would never see human eyes, and it might have just been screened out by like an algorithm or whatever through an automated system. But, thankfully, I had this connection with my friend in the company. So, they printed out my CV, they gave it to their supervisor, and that's almost certainly the reason why I got the initial call. But like, yes, since I know, okay, I have this friend in the company, okay, I have access to information. And so, when I got the email, okay, about, hey, we're actually going to go with a more qualified candidate, a couple of days later, I got a text message from my friend who works there saying, well, actually, we had a meeting, and we're not hiring for that position anymore. Like, that's closed. We kind of like changed our mind or whatever. The funding dried up for that position or whatnot. So basically, they were not going with a more qualified candidate. They're not hiring anybody. False alarm, basically. And so, oh yeah, maybe I wasn't diverse enough. That's totally a possibility. And so, like, yeah, that's, again, I don't mind being rejected, or like I can deal with rejection, like whatever. No skin off my back. But like, yeah, if you're going to actively lie to my face, it's like, well, you didn't have to. Yeah, you're going out of your way to like lie to me. I didn't need an email that was worded saying, hey, we're going with a more qualified candidate. You could have like left that out. You could have just said like, we're not continuing with your application. You don't need to like add in the lie, where again, if I didn't have this connection with my friend inside the company, it's like, yeah, you're just now exposed as a liar. So, my experiences with companies, with a small handful of companies so far, not overly positive. So that's why I, up until this point, took matters into my own hands, so to speak, where pretty much since about December, January, I've been tutoring, teaching students, teaching/tutoring students, chemistry, biochemistry, biology, organic chemistry. And I've totally had to brush up a little bit on some of my general chemistry. And I've been pleasantly surprised how much I still retain from that, and how much pretty much, well, yeah, it's all still there in the filing cabinet of my brain. It's just a matter of refreshing. So that's what I've been doing. It's been working out. I've also been pleasantly surprised in terms of the feedback. Okay, where at least so far, again, maybe these people are lying to my face, but let's just say, there's less incentive for my former students to lie to me than, let's say, a company. But like, yeah, and also I get the feedback in terms of students are not only taking sessions, they are continuing to take sessions, where there's nothing stopping a student from like, oh, have the first session and actually change my mind, Corey's no good. So I'm pretty much getting consistent feedback in terms of, oh yes, I'm going to give Corey a try, and so far it's working out. They can stop at any time, it's totally voluntary. So I take that as a positive sign. And I started off pretty small, or actually not pretty small. I did start off as small as you can get, as in December. I started off with one student, okay, one student for chemistry, and pretty much focused all my efforts on that. And it was December, and so their exams were coming up. Although their exams were delayed until mid-January, so I was tutoring them until basically mid-December to like late January, and yeah, they had their exam in January, and then once their exam was done, and pretty much our sessions were done, I reached out to them and I said, hey, can you write me a review? Just like send me an email, and pretty much you can say whatever you want, either positive or negative. Basically, what did I do well? What did I not do well? Things to improve upon. What was disastrous, if anything. And I made it clear, since everything is done, it's like, I'm not gonna come after you. Like, I let them know, if you want to just send the email and then block me on every platform in existence, and you'll obviously never hear from me again, you can do that, where pretty much no matter what you say, like, it's not going to come back and haunt you, and I'm not going to take offense whatsoever, where they pretty much have an open platform to say whatever they want. And again, they had already written their exam, gotten the result, more or less satisfied with their result, and so like, yeah, pretty much just an open review on me, and thankfully, or not thankfully, but yeah, they said positive things. They also, to their credit, they included, let's say, at the end, it's like, if I can criticize you for anything, like, it would be this. That was totally like a fair criticism, for sure, and totally a fair criticism that I can totally improve upon, and that I'm grateful that they were able to say that, and everything else was positive. So with that, and I guess a little bit of a boost in confidence, even though, like, I've already, like, I have prior tutoring experience, I have prior teaching experience. I've taught in a classroom, I've tutored friends and students, but like, I've never really done it like truly independently. Like, pretty much, I'm sort of like self-employed essentially now. So that was sort of like my first official review, and it was a positive review, and let's say further bolstered my confidence that I can do it. So I started actively looking for more students, and so far it's working out, and so I'm going with that for now, and we'll see where it leads me, but as of right now, basically focusing my efforts there has paid off more than whatever focusing on applying for jobs and jumping through corporate hoops, where I jumped through a lot of hoops for the company that hired me for the 5 days and then whatever fired me after 5 days. So I am feeling a little bit burnt, but no resentment. So that's where I'm at now that I'm essentially, I would say, stabilized, and the tutoring is working out, and that's why I'm back to streaming. But I did not fully disappear. I've still been around. I have not been as active in the Discord as I should be, but as you can hopefully see in the Discord, I'm much more active now, and I should be, for hopefully whatever, for the long-term future. But like, yeah, I've still been going on panels. Okay, I've still been going on Prime Kai's panels just about every week, and I'm super grateful that they continue to invite me. And I went on that Playing with Fire panel, pretty much talking about Red Pill Manosphere stuff. And that was definitely an interesting conversation, or interesting discussion panel, to say the least. And mildly frustrating, in that, there's definitely a lot that I wanted to correct, because there was a lot of incorrect information being spoken by one of the panelists there, just like straight, essentially misinformation and like unscientific stuff, and basically getting like the basic scientific method wrong, and conflating, hypothesis with theory. And as much as I wanted to correct that, it would end up me basically like, hogging the panel time, and just like optically, that doesn't look good. And I think already optically, I didn't look good, because I think for the first 45 minutes of that discussion panel, so it was basically me and Destiny and two other people. So me and Destiny, on the same side, and then two other people as, our opponents. And I sort of clued in fairly quickly that, it didn't seem like Destiny wanted to be there, which is understandable, because they pretty much debated this topic to death. And so it's like, it's basically just it's like the 10th rerun for them. So, I got the sense that they didn't really want to be there, and they didn't want to say very much. So like, in the beginning, I think I was doing most of the talking on our side. No, they don't pay to be on panels, or rather the payment is exposure, or at least I've never been paid to be on a panel, which I have no expectation to be paid. I go there somewhat out of enjoyment, maybe some might say torture, but mostly, to either have myself challenge or challenge people that I think should be challenged, where I'm pretty confident that their beliefs are pretty backwards. But like, yeah, pretty much since I was doing most of the talking on our side for the first 45 minutes of that panel, yeah, I didn't want to come across, even though no matter what, with that audience, I'm always going to come across poorly. But like, yeah, I didn't want to like fully dominate and do all the speaking and like, hey, I'm going to give you like a basic science lesson of like, when we say theory in science, this is what we mean by theory, and that's different than hypothesis. You're conflating the word, or confusing the word theory with hypothesis, and you just have no idea what you're talking about. But whatever. Regardless, that panel happened, and it seems like quite a few people have seen it, since multiple people have contacted me about it. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm still in the space, but now I am back in this. Oh, I will track it down, and I'll even post in the Discord as well. Good question. That should be the link. And I will also post in the Discord. Yeah, lots of wild stuff. Not really wild, but like, yeah. When it comes to information, some of the information that was said there by our opponents, not backed up in evidence. But like, yeah, starting to get back into covering science and research, okay? And this also, let's say, further black pills me on, like, the job search. And why, let's say, as of right now, I'm more or less pretty satisfied that, I've put the job search on hold, and, like, I'm focusing on, like, doing my own thing and cultivating my own thing. Because, I try to apply the scientific method when I can, apply the scientific method and research to, just about everything in my life. And I applied it to, the job search, or asked myself the question of, like, all these companies, every posting that I come across, it's like, even entry level, it's like entry level, you need like 5 years of experience, or like entry level, you need 2 years of experience. And it's like, well, how is this entry level? I've asked this question in the past, okay, because, like, from my own personal experiences, okay, like, experience doesn't predict performance. And that's highlighted here. So there's this article in Harvard Business Review, but this article is summarizing original research, and I have the original research of, like, well, what happens when we try to look into or try to ask the question of, like, well, does job experience actually predict, success or job performance? The answer is essentially no. There's essentially no correlation. So, Chad, fitting name, when talking about red pill stuff, Chad Van Iddekinge of Florida State University and his colleagues reviewed 81 studies to investigate the link between an employee's prior work experience and his or her performance in a new organization. They found no significant correlation between the two. Even when people had completed tasks, held roles, or worked in functions or industries relevant to their current ones, it did not translate into better performance. The conclusion: experience doesn't predict a new hire's success. Van Iddekinge: we were surprised. It seems so intuitive that applicants who have general work experience or have already done the job that they're applying for would be at an advantage. But when we looked at all these studies, and we sifted through thousands to find the 81 with pertinent data, we discovered a very weak relationship between pre-hire experience and performance, both in training and on the job. We also found zero correlation between work experience with earlier employers and retention, or the likelihood that a person would stick with his or her new organization. Harvard Business Review asks, but isn't experience the first thing companies look for when screening candidates? And that definitely holds true in my experience of, like, of all the HR recruiter calls and interviews that I have. It's like, hey, what's your experience with this thing? Do you have experience with flow cytometry? Do you have experience with lateral flow assays? Absolutely. We sampled 115 Monster.com job ads and found that 82% either required or stated a strong preference for experience. Most organizations think that it's important, even for entry-level jobs. Unfortunately, the evidence doesn't support the idea that applicants with more experience will be better or longer tenured employees than with those with less. How did the studies measure performance? It varied, but typically in two ways: either supervisor evaluations, such as annual reviews, or more objective, quantifiable metrics, such as sales, or in one paper on sewing machine operators, parts produced. What types of jobs and industries are we talking about here? The ones most represented were protective services, police, firefighters, and then sales and customer service jobs. Study participants mainly worked in frontline positions, though some were managers. None were at the senior executive level. But we captured 15 of the 23 job families listed by the U.S. Labor Department's Occupational Information Network, so we felt it was a pretty good representation of the U.S. economy. Why on earth wouldn't people with experience, especially directly relevant experience, outperform those without it? My co-authors, John Arnold of Florida State University, Rachel Frieder of the University of North Florida, and Philip Roth of Clemson University, and I have speculated about that. One possibility is that many measures of experience are pretty basic. The number of jobs you've held, tenure at your previous employers, years of total work, whether or not you've previously worked in a similar role. Those metrics tell us whether a candidate possesses experience, but not about the quality or significance of that experience, which would probably have more bearing on performance. One of the basic premises in our area of research is that past behavior predicts future behavior, but pre-hire experience isn't a measure of behavior. Right, so you can have experience, but if that experience is low quality, okay, or if you're, yeah, pretty much, I think that's what it boils down to. And, this is what I know from, again, pulling from my own experience. The best example that I can think of offhand, it's like, as if you've been around this channel long enough, you know that I'm very physically active. And like that's also what I still continue to do and have been doing during my time away from streaming. I'm still heavily physically active, still going to the gym virtually every single day. And unless I become injured or something else, I hope that never changes. But yeah, still making good progress in the gym. But like, yeah, I think, if you are an avid enough gym goer and you make enough connections at the gym or know enough people at the gym or have spent enough time at one specific gym, okay, you totally come across people that, for whatever reason, and it could be like intentional, but there are totally people that like, they have experience going to the gym and like lots of experience going to the gym. And yet, there's essentially no difference in their performance of like, I have totally observed of like, I've been a member of one particular gym for like a decade. Okay. And I've totally have seen people of like, I've seen them throughout the entirety of my decade there. And it's like, they appear to be making no progress whatsoever. Now, not to be judgmental, but because maybe that is intentional. Not everyone has like their specific goals. Like I need to make progress in every single domain. Totally, maintenance is a thing. But like, through conversations, okay, this is one of the reasons why I have some experience, or rather have experience as a personal trainer, because, I interact with some of these people, like people that, that they've been going to the gym for years, okay, and they have the experience, but, for whatever reasons, for a variety of reasons that are complicated, they struggle with making progress, where it's like, yeah, they can say that they have the experience. Like, I go to the gym, I've been going for years, but it doesn't mean that the quality is there or that they're making progress. And again, for some people, the lack of progress is intentional. But totally for a subset of people, like the lack of progress is for a variety of other reasons. Where it's like they want to intentionally make progress, but they struggle to make progress. And I think that totally, occurs in many other domains. And I think that's what they're speaking to when it comes to this aspect of job performance. Of like, just because you have experience with this one specific job or task, that doesn't mean it's good quality. That doesn't mean you've learned anything. That doesn't mean that you excel at it or that you have the capability to learn other things. So, let's see, where was I? Yeah, the person might have failed or stagnated in previous jobs, right? Where it's like, okay, maybe for your past role, it's like, maybe you excelled at it or you were able to perform the job, but like, you hit a ceiling pretty quickly. And like you didn't excel at the position, or you didn't take it upon yourself to maybe, if you have the opportunity, to expand your role, or find ways to excel, etc., etc. So we should take experience into account, but maybe do a better job of delving into pre-hire performance. We also want to know whether candidates have learned from their prior experiences. People aren't always good at that, right? They might forget things that have gone wrong or explain them away. And last, we need to consider that experience in one organization might not help and might even hurt performance in another if they don't operate the same way or have similar cultures. Don't interviews and reference check help employers figure all that out? yes, especially when you ask behavioral questions like, how have you previously handled difficult clients? Tell me about a specific situation, what you did, and what the outcome was. But not all employers evaluate candidates that way. And it's possible that applicants who could answer well have already been screened out due to their lack of traditional work experience. So, what factors beyond experience should we consider? Well, another reason employers look for hires with experience is that they think previous jobs have helped those people build up knowledge and skills. They might even think that candidates who have done certain types of work have particularly desirable personality traits. But we'd recommend focusing on the knowledge, skills, and traits directly, rather than using experience or even education as a proxy. Right. So actually truly evaluate the candidate as opposed to, let's say, judging them, again, based off of their past experience, based off of their academic credentials, even though I have academic credentials. I would say I've performed. I'm pretty proud of my performance academically, but even I recognize that that only says so much, or rather, that I would say, strictly speaking, only says that, I can excel academically at this particular field that I have the grades in. And I wouldn't even necessarily recommend an employer to weigh my academic credentials heavily. Because I recognize that, because again, this just goes based off of my own experience. And again, this might just me being judgmental, totally. But I've totally come across very well credentialed people, way more credentialed than me. And I find that those credentials don't really seem to mean much, or there appears to be a strong disconnect of like, well, you say you're an expert in this thing and you have the credentials to back it up, and doesn't seem to hold true in my opinion. But maybe I'm the idiot. Are there any scenarios in which experience matters? We did identify a couple of situations in which it does seem to have more of a benefit. First, we found a smaller set of studies within our data set that looked at pre-hire experience and performance on the job after 3 months, 2 years, and 5 years. Although the relationship was weak at the 2 and 5 year marks, it was stronger at 3 months, so experience appears to have helped some people as they were getting started. That's totally fair. And absolutely there's an irony in that statement. So it's a little bit paradoxical, right? In my experience doesn't matter. So maybe my experience with experience also doesn't matter. I don't know. It's a really tricky thing. But at the end of the day, okay, going back to my experience with this company. So as I said to them, or as I said specifically, okay, not to belabor the point, okay, but I had that last meeting on the Monday, okay, my crucifixion, and once that was wrapped up, once these left the room / conference call, okay, I asked Thomas, the CTO / co-founder, the partner of this person, to pretty much stay behind, because I wanted to pretty much have a one-on-one conversation, or pretty much share my parting words. And like I said, none of these people have any teaching experience whatsoever, either in the classroom or outside the classroom or in a lab. Pretty much no relevant teaching experience. But maybe that doesn't matter, right? Because maybe experience doesn't matter. But what I said to Thomas as sort of some of my parting words, it's like, I have a lot of teaching experience, okay? And I'm leveraging my extensive experience now. Sernu, thank you so much for passing by. It's always a pleasure to see you. I hope you're doing well also, and hope to see you soon. I should hopefully be back to a regular streaming schedule. And yeah, it's been great to receive a warm welcome. So take care and be well. But yeah, as part of my parting words, is like I said, I have extensive teaching experience, and I'm leveraging it now with my tutoring, and the teaching that I've done in the classroom, and the teaching that I've done in a lab, helping students in the lab, being a teaching assistant. I have a lot of experience with that. And I have quite a bit of positive feedback around that, okay? I have lots of emails from many students thanking me for my help. I have examples of students, I've received baked goods, as a thank you from some of my former students. And so what I said to Thomas as some of my parting words, it's like, hey, listen, as someone who's done a lot of teaching, like I would never judge anyone on like literally 2 days worth of work, that was my experience. Like I said, pretty much I only did things, I only produced my own things on Wednesday and Thursday, and Monday and Tuesday was just me shadowing. And it's like, how can you judge anybody based off of just 2 days worth of work? That seems like a really, poor thing to do, or just like poor practice. Pretty much like a snap judgment, where everyone has bad days, everyone has bad weeks, and it's like you're gonna judge me on literally just like 2 days worth of work. Like, I don't know what you're thinking here. I don't know how you can call yourself a good manager or a good CTO and a good co-founder if like you're allowing this to happen, okay? And again, not to belabor the point, but the founders of this company, okay, Thomas and Marina, okay, they are essentially, in my opinion, okay, again, this is all essentially speculative on my part, but from what I can tell in my observations, they are held hostage by the R&D scientists at the company, because, as mentioned, if you look at their bios, they have no experience, no prior experience in biotech, and they don't have any sort of background in biotech, okay? But again, as we're sort of covering, experience only counts for so much, but at the very least, like, I can say with confidence, like, the fundamental knowledge isn't there. Like, I would say you do need to have some sort of biochemistry or biology knowledge in order to evaluate, like, what's going on with the R&D. Like, think of it this way, okay? These R&D scientists, they're doing research and development. Okay, well, who's evaluating their research and development? Okay, is there any like head scientists or sort of like any expertise that can evaluate what they're doing? Well, the answer is no. Okay, like the co-founders themselves, I can say like with pretty much 100% confidence, they are not like world-renowned experts in the type of testing that they are trying to develop. Okay, pretty much the most experience they have, the evaluation is coming from like within, like they're evaluating themselves. Pretty much they're giving themselves the thumbs up. And Thomas and Marina, they pretty much have to somewhat go on faith. They cannot go inside the lab and like audit and take a magnifying glass to what the R&D scientists are doing, because they're not qualified. They don't have the knowledge or expertise to do that, okay? And some of my speculation, my further speculation on my part, it's like I think they were a little bit afraid of having someone actually qualified come in and take a close look at what they're actually doing, okay? Because again, as mentioned, I have more credentials than all of them. I do have more experience than all of them, but I recognize that only counts for so much. But I feel speculation that they were a little bit concerned, or they were potentially threatened by my presence there, and were potentially looking for any excuse to get me out as quickly as possible. I don't think they wanted someone poking around too deeply into what they were doing there. because like yeah, all three of these R&D scientists, read their bios. They all come from the same former company. They're all friends. They were all pretty much friends before they started working for this company. And so I think there was, again, speculation on my part, a little bit of like them trying to protect themselves. Have you seen Research on Intelligence? Yes, I have. And I have some of that research. And they're definitely, without going down an intelligence slash G factor IQ rabbit hole. I'm not going to cover it now, but I can totally cover some of the research in the future. Yeah, it may very well. Like I said, this is all pure speculation on my part. At the end of the day, I will never truly know the reasons as to why I was fired. But, I have the audio recording, the full hour-and-a-half audio recording of that final meeting that occurred. And it's I would say, maybe someday I'll play it, but I would say it's pretty clear what was going on there. But like, yeah, I don't know for sure. Totally could be cope. Absolutely. So where was I? Yeah, the relationship what to do. Maybe it's because they were accustomed to employment and organizational life and could hit the ground running. Or perhaps managers gave the employees who came in with experience better ratings at first. But over time, employees' pre-hire experience became less and less important to performing their current job. So like, yeah, for some roles, experience matters, but even that has limitations of like, it seems to give you a leg up over someone that has no experience, but it's not a predictor of like, oh, this person's going to excel. Like, the sky's the limit. It's pretty much as they say. They start off better, but it's not a predictor of like the person excelling or performing above expectations. Second, again, in a smaller number of studies, we saw measures of experience more at the task level. So for example, instead of asking pilots or truck drivers how many years they'd worked in those jobs, employers would ask how many hours they'd logged flying or driving. Those metrics were better predictors of future performance. Is it realistic to think that HR departments and hiring managers will stop screening for experience? You can understand why so many organizations do it. Experience is easy to assess. Have you worked in sales for 3 years? Have you managed people before? It's either a yes or a no. Past performance and existing knowledge and skills are more difficult to figure out, especially if all you have is an application or a resume. But today, when everyone is complaining about the skills shortage and the war for talent, companies can't afford to knock out candidates who would do really well but don't have the experience that someone has chosen to put in the job description. You want to expand the pool of people you're considering. Are there any other simple screens we could use instead? Probably, but they would vary by organization and job. The key thing is evidence of correlation with job performance. Let's say there's a role you need to fill in the sales department and you see over time that people who majored in marketing tend to stay longer and get better customer reviews than those who studied other subjects. That could be a viable screen. For another job, it could be having some certification. The data might show that employees who have it outperform their peers, so you look for it when hiring. Companies could consider using other screening tools too, like job-relevant tests. The problem is that most organizations don't take those steps. They use data to make decisions about products, marketing, and finance, but they don't use it to make decisions about people, at least not effectively. So it's like, yeah, even though companies will say and they will claim that, they want to, hire the best person for the job, but the tools that they are using to, assess candidates or screen candidates, it's basically unscientific. And, it's super interesting. Obviously I'm in biotech, so, I have been searching, or I was searching for roles in scientific companies. And, I'm coming to learn that they are approaching hiring in an unscientific way. And, I would say it shows, or I think it's a good demonstration of, how much tunnel vision we can get. Or even, how scientists or, scientific companies and organizations just rely on heuristics and metrics. And, they don't apply the scientific method to everything that they're doing, even though it's probably to their advantage. Like if you actually want to hire the most skilled, or to be able to predict who's going to excel at a role or who's going to be the most skilled, your basic heuristics that everyone uses, probably not the good heuristics. Does experience within an organization matter? We didn't look at post-hire experience, but other research suggests that there is a link between how long someone has been in the job or working at a company and how well they perform. It's not a super strong relationship, but it's something companies might consider when deciding on promotions and transfers. Is experience more important for managers? That's something we're looking at now. If, say, a sales rep wants to be a sales manager, how much does his or her experience in that lower level job predict success in the more senior one? I've been a senior editor at HP for 9 years. Impression. Do you think I'll do a good job on this piece? Okay, a little bit of a joke there at the end. So yeah, this article that's speaking, not this, but to this research, which this is a meta-analysis. So the article that we were just reading or going through is basically a summary of this study here, which was a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis of the criterion-related validity of pre-hire work experience. And you have that Chad H. Van Idekinj person. We're not going to go through the entire article, but we pretty much got the summary. Based off of their meta-analysis, going through their abstract, organizations frequently screen or select job applicants based on their work experience. Despite this, surprisingly little is known about the criterion-related validity of pre-hire experience, which reflects the amount, duration, or type of experience workers have acquired before they enter a new organization. To address this critical gap in the literature, we used a meta-analysis to synthesize data from 81 independent samples that reported relations between pre-hire experience and performance or turnover. Results revealed overall corrected correlations of 0.6 for job performance, 0.11 for training performance, this is a low correlation, and basically 0 for turnover. Measures that capture pre-hire experience with tasks, jobs, or occupations relevant to workers' current position also are only weakly related to the outcomes. Two exceptions to our main findings are that pre-hire experience is somewhat more predictive of job performance when workers first start a new job, and B, measures of task-level experience predict training performance, although these results are based on small subsets of primary studies. Overall, the present findings suggest that the types of pre-hire experience measures organizations currently use to screen job applicants generally are poor predictors of future performance and turnover. We therefore caution organizations from selecting employees based on such measures unless more positive evidence emerges. So yeah, that's a summary of this entire meta-analysis. And this is basically the best one that I can find in terms of looking at, how does prior experience predict job performance. There's totally other studies, and again, but pretty much it seems to hold true. The literature appears to be moderately robust, that, basically, even though it seems like every job looks for experience, doesn't really predict anything whatsoever. And just to sort of put a pin on the point, there's this research here. Maybe we'll go through it more in depthly in a future stream, but basically, as the title says, inflated applicants, attribution errors in performance evaluation by professionals of even expert evaluators don't seem to be too good at assessing candidates, and they tend to go by the heuristic of like, well, if you've performed well in the past, even if, so in this study here, just like in a nutshell, they're asking the question of like, okay, if a company is, let's say, for example, hiring candidates based off of like the GPA of the degree that they got, many companies will have like a GPA cutoff of like, hey, if your GPA is below 3, you're basically not in the running. But as this article brings up and like tries to like tease out, not every GPA in every program at every institution matters. I think most people recognize that not every academic institution is created equally, and that going to a difficult academic institution versus an easy one, or going into an easy program versus a difficult program, the GPA doesn't take that into account. And it's like, do individuals that are supposed to evaluate performance, of candidates, do they factor in contextual factors of like, basically, is the person with that 3.0 at Harvard, are they assessed the same as like the 3.0 at like, no name university? It seems like, that like, yeah, they're treated the same. Of like, if you come from an institution that inflates their GPA, that's actually to your advantage, as in like individuals evaluating candidates, they don't care about inflated grades or inflated GPAs. The contextual factors aren't taken into account, and they go through a little bit more in depth of basically not good at assessing performance, even though like that's pretty much like their job, or they will testify that they are good at assessing candidates and performance, but when we look at it objectively, turns out not so much. So I think that's pretty much overall what I wanted to cover this stream. Obviously didn't get much to actual science, but at the end of the day, I wanted to devote most of this return stream to giving an update, but we covered a little bit of science. So yeah, I'm going to end it here for today. My voice is sort of like giving out a little bit. The vibe, well, I don't disagree with you. That's also been my experience as well. But experience doesn't only counts for so much. So, I should be back. So, thank you everyone for passing by. Louis 13, first of all. Much appreciated. Always nice to see you. And thank you so much to Talarex for the raid. Shout out to them again. That was a very nice, pleasant surprise. And shout out to Katie. Shout out to Bob Marley. Shout out to Cernu. And anybody else that I forgot. Shout out to Doffy. That's pretty true. Mooncake. Thank you so much for the sub. Super appreciated. I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of people. Chase Sadie. Thank you so much for the follow. But yeah, I should be back on Tuesday. I'm going to provide an update in the Discord. If anything, it'll be next weekend. Next weekend is Easter, so probably not on Sunday. Most likely Saturday. But I should be back on Tuesday. I'm going to keep the Discord updated. But the main message is I should be back to streaming regularly. So let's see if I can find someone to raid. And yes, this has been a very nice warm welcome back. I'm not gonna lie, there was a little bit of anxiety, a touch of anxiety, going live. Is anyone left to tune in? Did I lose all my following? And I was, pleasantly surprised, super happy. So we're going to raid into Jason's Society, fellow based streamer. They do Stonercast, cover a lot of content around cannabis and cannabis legalization. We're gonna raid into them. But yeah, gonna set that up. So yeah, thank you everyone. Super appreciated. Should be back to regular streams. Should be Tuesday or next weekend. But if anything, check the Discord. Feel free to join the Discord. Recommend topics, give feedback, ask questions. And if you're not following Jason's Society, you absolutely should be. And until next time, take care and be well.